Up next on The Reveal.
To make love to you would be great.
Our months-long investigation reveals a decade of sexual misconduct complaints against a university police officer.
Why does it take so many voices to scream so loud before anybody hears anything?
It's not who you know, it's who you and you're gonna have sex with somebody if you're gonna work here.
What did university officials know? And when did they know it?
It just seems like everybody was in cahoots together.
You feel like you play no role in this.
And 2 years after our investigation, a major player in the sperm bank industry changes its policies.
What's going on? Why is it like this? We tried out so many medications.
From our Midtown studios in Atlanta, The Reveal begins now with investigators Faith Abube and Brendan Keefe.
Welcome to The Reveal, an investigative show making an impact.
It was last fall when Fort Valley State University in Central Georgia made national news after several top administration officials were charged and now indicted in a pimping and prostitution scandal. But as you're about to learn, that's not the only sex scandal on campus. Our months-long investigation unravels a decade of sexual misconduct against a university police sergeant.
Sergeant Bryant is well respected.
Performance reviews going back 10 years
Sergeant Bryant always displays a team spirit.
paint a picture of decorated police sergeant Wilbur Bryant
is always willing to assist others.
that would make any boss proud.
It exemplifies all the characteristics of a leader.
By all appearances, the veteran police officer is highly regarded on the Fort Valley State University campus.
He exhibits outstanding customer service.
Exceeds expectations.
He was part of the university president's security detail and in charge of the school's fire safety program. That's how Shanae Hall's 18-year-old daughter told her she first saw Sergeant Bryant.
And he had already seen her at a fire drill, so he had his eyes on her from the beginning.
A few weeks later, Sergeant Bryant arrested the freshman for fighting with classmates on campus.
He pulled up his file, Googled himself and said, "Did you see who I am? Do you see this title? Do you see what I make? I can protect you. As long as you're with me, nothing will ever happen."
Hall says Sergeant Bryant found her daughter's phone number on the police report and initiated a personal relationship.
Her first thing was, "Oh, this officer is really nice. He's trying to help me with my case, and he's, going to help me, get a job on campus, and he's looking out for me."
That was February 2018. By spring break, the 52-year-old veteran police officer ramped up what Fort Valley State University's own investigation found to be inappropriate contact with a female student.
Because she was an athlete, she had to stay and train. All the other students are gone. So he goes up, swipes his badge to get into the dorm facility, and then comes up to her room. Then he knocked on the door, invited himself in, and just started explaining, that they basically should be a couple, and what he can offer.
Sergeant Bryant was still in full uniform, service weapon by his side, when according to court documents, he allowed himself into Hall's daughter's dorm room without permission. The university refuses to release the video showing Bryant walking in.
When she was sitting down on her bed, she said he walked over and her feet were crossed, and he put his penis on her feet. That's when he came in and was like trying to get a kiss. What do? Do you run? Do you scream? There's no one there to listen.
It would be a freshman student's word against a veteran police officer. So Hall's daughter decided to record the phone calls.
Everybody now, you got some freak inside of them. You just gotta find a way to pull it out of them.
That's Sergeant Bryant on the phone with the 18-year-old freshman.
Why can't I satisfy you in that area? To make love to you would be great.
This goes on for about an hour.
When you walked in my office, something told you this man important.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm willing to put my job on the line for you, what that tell you?
True.
That tell you that I'm really into you. It's not a joke. It's just like coming to your room. Number one, you got cameras on the hallway, so if you go back and pull the camera, they see what room I went to. You follow me?
The good thing is she had the wherewithal to understand that this person's not trying to protect you. This person's not trying to help you. He's trying to sleep with you, period. And she was smart enough to pick up her phone and record the conversation.
Hall turned that recording over to attorney Kenneth Lewis, who's now representing the family against Bryant, the university, and the Board of Regents in a lawsuit.
I think part of the reason that this culture and that Officer Bryant was so emboldened to say the things he said on that tape was he's never had any repercussions.
Sergeant Bryant and his attorney declined to comment on the allegations, and both Fort Valley State University and the Board of Regents declined our repeated requests for an interview on how they handled a decade of complaints against Sergeant Bryant. Our investigation has uncovered Hall's daughter's written claim to the university is just one of a list of sexual assault, inappropriate contact, and harassment allegations against Sergeant Bryant at the Fort Valley State University Campus Police Department.
I didn't expect the atmosphere that I saw.
Kelly Williams also made a written complaint against Bryant about a decade ago.
He asked me to post at campus faculty housing.
Sergeant Bryant asked her that because she was the new campus security officer.
I called on the radio saying I'm out of gas. He said, okay, don't worry about it, I'll come pick you up. And he started telling me about the opportunities that were available for me on the campus, you know, if I slept with him.
Oh, so he was that direct?
Yeah. And I thought all of that sounded really great. And then he started pulling my clothes off, and I was saying no.
Right there and then in the car?
Yes. I felt, you know, he was about to rape me, and I was like, we were like fighting for my clothes, and I was like, please, no, I'm on my period, just stop. And that's the only reason why he stopped.
Sergeant Bryant stopped that night, but Williams says he used his authority over and over again to continue a non-consensual sexual relationship with her. The school's internal review files show, since Williams reported her case, half a dozen other co-workers and students have reported Bryant to the school for varying degrees of sexual misconduct.
I think any one of them would get you or I fired, just one.
And there were 8?
At 8 that were reported, and certainly there's an indication that many more were unreported.
None of the sexual misconduct complaints against Sergeant Bryant were ever mentioned in his annual reviews.
Always willing to go that extra mile.
Instead, for 10 years, bosses praised him for his work ethic and promoted him, while women on campus, students, and his own staff complained repeatedly.
If my children were attending Fort Valley, I would be gravely concerned, particularly if they were young women.
Why does Officer Bryant get 7 years or a decade before my daughter is the one that comes forward and says, this is enough? Like, why does it take so many voices to scream so loud before anybody hears anything?
Up next on The Reveal.
I was isolated, I was put aside. I did feel for a long time it was just me.
But according to documents obtained by The Reveal, there were more alleged victims.
This could have stopped long ago.
If you have a news tip or a comment on one of our investigations, email us at thereveal@11alive.com.
Welcome back to The Reveal. A campus police officer repeatedly accused of sexual harassment and inappropriate contact with students and staff. But for 10 years, our investigation uncovered the university kept him on the force. The accusers say it's because there was a culture of sexual impropriety that went all the way up to the top.
He started pulling my clothes off, and I was saying no.
By his 16th year on the Fort Valley State University campus police force.
No, stop, please, no.
More than half a dozen women had accused Sergeant Wilbur Bryant.
No.
Of inappropriate behavior.
No.
Several were sexual in nature.
Over and over again, he wouldn't stop.
When I look at you, I look at you from head to toe.
And yet, he remained on the police force until a freshman student recorded him in this phone conversation.
To make love to you would be great.
I think it was a culture.
Attorney Kenneth Lewis is representing the student's family in a lawsuit against the veteran police officer.
Somebody should have done something when the first woman raised her hand and said, Officer Bryant raped me.
That was in 2011, when internal documents from the school show former campus security officer Kelly Williams complained Sergeant Bryant intimidated her into a non-consensual sexual relationship.
I was isolated, I was put aside. I did feel for a long time it was just me.
But more documents from the school show it wasn't.
Sometimes I would drive by in shame.
Regina McCrary, another campus security officer, also complained to the university and said it was more than just Sergeant Bryant. She also accused the campus police chief himself.
I'm sorry. I couldn't go to my superiors there within the campus police because Chief Morgan was the chief of police.
As the chief of police here,
the university suspended Chief Morgan after its internal investigation, but said there wasn't enough evidence against Sergeant Bryant. A campus disciplinary review committee later disagreed, saying the university should have taken action against Bryant.
This could have stopped long ago, a long time ago. I think they both should have been fired out of uniform a long time ago.
Despite the allegations, both Sergeant Bryant and Chief Morgan stayed on the campus police force, while a third high-ranking officer in the same department also faced his own sexual harassment claim.
And what was the response you got? He said at Fort Valley State, it's not who you know, it's who you and you're going to have sex with somebody if you're going to work here.
It just seems like everybody was in cahoots together.
I could not.
The accusers say the university president and the Board of Regents should have stepped in after several women accused 3 of the top members of its police force of sexual misconduct. Documents show the president's office was looped in on several of the allegations, but all the officers stayed on the job.
I think they knew they could get away with it. They knew the small town would protect them.
Fort Valley State University declined our repeated requests for an interview, but allowed Sergeant Bryant to resign last year when the GVI finally opened a criminal case against him in the freshman's case.
Now, you heard what I just said about making love to you.
4 months after we started asking questions for this story, the school finally fired Chief Kenneth Morgan. He's been replaced with a female police chief who's a former sexual assault investigator.
So I think the evidence that we have so far indicates many people were involved in it, and certainly many more were aware of it, but just didn't know what to do, didn't know how to raise their hand.
I just feel like justice is emerging.
Officer Bryan was booked into the Peach County Jail and charged with 3 felonies, including violating his oath of office. The GBI still has an open investigation.
And Faith, again, this is unrelated to another sex scandal on campus. What's the latest with that?
7 people have been indicted in that sex scandal at Fort Valley State University. Prosecutors say the former executive to the university president was the leader in a prostitution ring.
Coming up on The Reveal.
We're all human, we all make mistakes. He's made many, the company has made even more.
2 years after an 11 Alive investigation, a major player in the sperm bank industry changes its policies.
Your voice is impinging upon my property.
This after we revealed a man with undisclosed mental illness fathered 3 dozen children. A Georgia sperm bank that allowed a man with mental illness to donate for more than a decade is overhauling its policies. The move comes after an 11 Alive investigation revealed the company did not share his mental health history with mothers before they used his sperm. Now one of those children has become a critic of the industry that gave him life.
I was just looking for info on who he was.
When this teen, who we'll call John, turned 14, he went online to see what he could learn about his donor, 9623. He'd read the profile provided by Zytex, but wanted to know more.
At this age, you're trying to find out what makes you, you.
He admittedly didn't expect to find much. But by then, the internet was filled with stories about the sperm donor, diagnosed bipolar with schizoaffective disorder, at the center of nearly a dozen lawsuits.
You know, there's a genetic component to schizophrenia, which is, for me at least, really terrifying.
According to the National Institute of Mental Health, schizophrenia can be hereditary. 10% of the donor's offspring could be diagnosed. According to court records, there are at least 36 kids born using his sperm, 17 girls and 19 boys. They are spread out over England, Canada, and the United States. John is one of the oldest.
A lot of times in the moment, I'm like, oh man, why do I have to know this?
His donor was allowed to write whatever he wanted on his application. No one checked to see if it was true, and turns out it wasn't. Now John believes the fits of depression and rage that have left marks on the walls and doors in his home are proof of the pain he has had to endure because of it.
What's going on? Why is it like this? We tried out so many medications, and I feel like if we just had that knowledge, it would have been so much easier.
Angie Collins, a mother in Canada, was one of the first parents to raise red flags about donor 9623 and Zytex's vetting process.
Never did I imagine that I would have paid to have a felon with multiple debilitating, inheritable mental health issues.
Collins learned after her son was born that at the time donor 9623 donated, he was a college dropout and had yet to earn his bachelor's degree, despite claiming on his application he was already working towards his PhD. He had also donated the sperm that gave her son life less than 2 months after getting out of jail for burglary. It was in those court filings information about his mental health emerged.
We're all human. We all make mistakes. He's made many. The company has made even more.
While Zytex tells parents up front they do not verify the accuracy of the information given by donors, they also boast a rigorous qualifications procedure that selects less than 5% of applicants.
And I said, oh my gosh, you're just going to be the perfect sperm donor.
In an audio interview Zytex recorded for prospective parents, the company praises the donor repeatedly. Even he shares why he continued donating sperm for more than 10 years.
I'm helping to give parents who are very eager to have a child, one of the greatest gifts in the world, their child. And I can't deny the power of that.
But when we tried to talk with the donor in 2017, he refused to answer questions about that help or the concerns families are now facing. Schizophrenia is usually not diagnosed until late teens or early adulthood, so all they can do now is wait.
You feel like you play no role in this.
I feel like your part to play in this is null and void.
Because all of the cases against Zytex were dismissed or settled out of court, the donor has never had to testify or explain why he falsified information on his application. While the company also denies any wrongdoing, it announced in March that it is making changes. It will no longer accept anonymous donors and has expanded its genetic testing to cover more than 280 conditions. It will conduct criminal background checks on new donors and place a cap on the number of children that can be born by any one donor. John says it's a start.
It's literally people's lives and children, but it's super unregulated.
Zytex says it's pledging unprecedented transparency, but when I called asking for more information, the company refused to talk with me, and our requests for an on-camera interview have gone unanswered.
Still, Rebecca, the changes they've proposed, they seem promising, don't they?
They do, but remember, these changes only impact one company, Zytex, and the FDA doesn't test for these kinds of changes, so we're really taking them at their word because they simply can't be verified.
If you have a news tip or a comment on one of our investigations, email us at thereveal@11alive.com.
"11 Alive" is launching its first ever podcast, delving into 2 notorious cold cases. In 1965, Mary Shotwell Little vanished from Lenox Square Mall. Less than 2 years later, Diane Shields was found brutally murdered in the trunk of her own car. Investigative journalist Jessica Knoll is working to uncover whether these cases are connected in her 7-chapter podcast series, 5 Roses.
You've been watching The Reveal, a show dedicated to impact investigations.
And we'll see you next week on The Reveal.